Alrighty, let's go ahead and start. Hi again, I'm Adrienne Zanella, KM Coordinator of the TOPS program with Core Group, and I will be producing the SBC Task Force meeting number 26 today. Welcome everyone. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. As you can just let on the chat box, please let us know how the audio for all of the presenters and myself sound. And if there's any issue, we'll get to it right away. And as for any questions or comments you may have for the presentations we have today, please go ahead and type them in the chat box. And for our the part of the presentation where we look over the resources, and Ashley will talk about it later, but the link to the resource is just at the bottom of the presentation, and it's titled Resource Link. So you can go ahead and click on that later if you haven't already. So without further ado, I'm going to give the mic to Mary DeCoster, a Senior SBC Specialist with the TOPS program of Food for the Hungry. Mary?
Morning. So I'm Mary DeCoster, as Adrienne said, Senior Specialist for welcome to meeting number 20 the SBC Task Force. It's hard to believe there have been so many. So today we have a pretty exciting agenda. Usually we do a little piece where people introduce themselves to tell us what they're reading, working on, thinking about. But I think that we need to just do that in the chat box, right? Oh, okay, Adrienne just gave you guys microphones, so we will be able to do that piece. That's great. You know, somewhat quickly. And then Ashley is calling in from Kyrgyzstan, or one of the stands. I'm sorry, I forgot again where she is. And she'll review the resource Formative Research, a guide to support the collection and analysis of qualitative data for integrated maternal and child nutrition program planning. And it turns out that Lynette Golding actually wrote that while she was at CARE, so she will also join if she's able. She's hoping to get away. Then after that, Jillian will present and lead a sparkling discussion on participatory learning and action, and then I'll have a few updates for you all and announcements from our work plan. Let's see. So we could just start at the top and people could go through and tell us what's new with you and what have you been reading kind of related to SBC or other exciting things you'd want us to know about. So Ashley, are you able to take the mic and introduce yourself?
Hi there. I'm a SBCC advisor with the Spring Project. I work for the Manoff Group. I am in Kyrgyzstan right now, but usually based in Roslyn, Virginia, just outside of DC. And I'm going to be talking about what I've been reading and looking at when I do the research review, so I'll stop there.
Should I go next, Mary? This is Claire Boswell. I am new to TOPS and Food for the Hungry, and I am also a social behavior change specialist. And I'm trying to catch up of all the SBC stuff that's happened in the past few years. And so I'm still reading Switch, which most of you probably read years ago.
I guess I can go next. My name is Jillian McKay. I'm a health advisor with Goal, and I'll be presenting on hopefully something that's not super familiar with everybody. I'm sure many of you know about PLA, but I'll tell you a little bit about some of my experiences with it. And I didn't know we were doing a What Are You Reading, but I thought, well, sitting here at my desk, I'm reading a book at the moment called Medical Humanitarianism, Ethnographies of Practice. And I thought that might be really interesting. So actually, if anybody's interested in that, let me know, because I've just devoured it. It's absolutely fabulous about anthropology in use in humanitarian situations.
Next.
It looks like it's me now. I think someone dropped off. I'm Amy Ostrander, Associate Technical Advisor for Food and Customer Security at PCI. And I've been reading about the growth mindset, which is some research by Carol Dweck that many of you might know about, and fixed mindset versus belief in learning and our ability to grow our skills and intelligence. And it's mostly US-based research, but I'm looking at it and applying it in developing context.
Thanks, Amy. Mia, it looks like you're back on. Do you want to try again? Mia's muted again. Let's move on down to Angela. Some technical issues. How about, I don't know who APS is, but if you're able to take the mic and introduce yourself, that would be great. And if you're not able to take the mic, just type in what, where you work and what you're reading. How about we move on to Cindy?
Hi, good morning. This is Cindy. And I am really interested in to read this book. It's called Nutrition in the Womb that I saw last week at the CORE conference as I helped prepare some adolescent nutrition materials and just really curious for new research that has come out in that area. And I'm currently working as a consultant and will be working with Feed the Children and Tom Davis soon on a project in Tanzania and Uganda.
Thanks, Cindy. How about Deborah? Mic problems as well. Francis or Jennifer?
Yes, hi.
Oh, there's Francis. Great. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I'm a social behavior change advisor with IMC. We work in emergency, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Jennifer? If you're able. Or Kim? Looks like plenty of technical difficulty here. So just go ahead and type into the box if you have something you want to share. Otherwise, we'll move ahead. Now Ashley will present, she's done a review of this guide that she's going to tell you all about. And then afterwards, we'll have an opportunity to, I'll send around a survey monkey and we'll have an opportunity to vote on whether to approve it as a task force recommended tool. So Ashley, you can take it away.
Great. So yeah, this resource has been out since 2013, but I only came across it in the last few months, and I think it's a really useful kind of survey of different formative research methods, and I find it very practical, so I think it could be really interesting for this task force to recommend. I just picked an example quote here from page 12 of the guide, just to kind of, I think it's representative of the very sort of straightforward tone with not too much jargon, and the way that it kind of builds on other principles of social and behavior change that people in the field might be familiar with, like the 5 behave principles, or designing for behavior change, that sort of thing. Okay, next, or can I advance the slides? Oh yeah, it looks like I can. I can, okay. I'm just going to give a real quick overview, and people, please feel free to ask me questions. And as Mary said, I didn't realize, or we didn't realize as we were thinking about proposing this document or reviewing this document, that Lynette Golding, who's one of the co-chairs of the core SBC group, actually, wrote this. So she did take a look at the slides and give us a little feedback, so that's good. And hopefully she might be able to call in for part of this call. Anyway, the essential the purpose of the guide is to provide basic information and tools around qualitative research as part of planning programs for nutrition and food security, and they can be adapted to other technical areas and sectors as well. The goals are to help define the key problems within a program context, to provide an introduction to what formative research is all about, to familiarize users with some qualitative methods, to offer step-by-step instructions on planning, conducting, and analyzing formative research. Oh, okay. Can you guys not hear me? Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, it's okay. Don't worry.
Okay, super. Okay, thanks. And then the guide does a really nice job of linking to other formative research guides and valuable resources that might help people wanting to apply this in their own program. So they assume, in terms of the audience for the guide or the users for the guide, that qualitative, prior experience with qualitative research isn't really assumed. But it also recommends, who should be on your formative research team. So it really helps if you've got folks with experience in nutrition, research, social and behavior change. We could also add like gender, M&E. So it's nice, the idea of recommending team composition. It focuses on qualitative methods because they're good at helping us identify, what are some of the reasons, the sort of why and how of why people are doing what they're doing, and why they may not be doing what we'd like them to be doing, or what they themselves would like to do in terms of getting to outcomes that they want. So it's intended to be a flexible format, so you don't have to use this guide from start to finish, straight through. You can just pick modules that are going to be useful for you for what your project needs at the time. And so they've broken it out so that each module is quite distinct, and especially once they get into specific methods of formative research or qualitative research, it's very distinct, so you can just use whatever's most useful for you. And so the authors of the guide kind of selected the formative research. They call them activities. I kind of think of them as methods, but so I'm kind of going to use that interchangeably. They've picked those methods that they feel like are going to be the best at encouraging people to share information, ideas, and concerns and knowledge, while at the same time protecting privacy and kind of safety, to support group learning, to help people to communicate effectively, to make it easier for the facilitator to manage group dynamics, because we know that there are really variable levels of experience when we get to doing formative research in the field in terms of that facilitation process. To make sure that they're collecting data that's practical and relevant, because once we get started planning formative research, we tend to want to find out everything about everything, but this really helps them, tries to help them stay focused. And then, really inviting the groups that we're working with who are affected by the issues to really take control of the learning and sharing process. And so the different activities or methods that are included in this guide are barrier analysis. Actually, what they did is they broke the methods out into categories. So within each of these categories, there might be 1 or 2 specific methods that have their own module. So, and I kind of like the categories. I think it's interesting the way they broke it out. So barrier analysis, participatory mapping, time analysis, including a gender perspective, linkages and relationships, prioritization and quantification, participatory action planning, and then experiential stuff. And by experiential, they mean sort of participatory focus group discussions, key informant interviews, but with kind of creative participatory activities mixed in. And then there's a summary table in the guide, early on in the guide, which gives you just a nice quick snapshot of all the activities along with what it might be most appropriate for helping you figure out. So the strengths of the guide, I felt were, it's a wide survey of some of the appropriate participatory methods to do formative research in the area of nutrition and food security. I felt it was very practical, and it reflects, you know, a real depth of experience in implementing formative research in the real world, given the resources and capacities of programs. And so, for example, and this list is just an example of the very practical stuff that's in there, talking about purpose of sampling, talking about how segmenting audiences as you're planning your formative research can help you get more in-depth insights, some guidelines for budgeting time and resources, which are kind of broken out by general phases of formative research, like conceptualizing, you know, secondary data review, you know, formative research planning, et cetera. And then creative approaches, yeah, to things like focus group discussions and interviews. Oh, sorry. Okay, hopefully it'll hang in there till I'm done. I'm almost done, so I hope, yeah, it hangs in there. Yeah, it also includes instructions for analyzing the data, which is sometimes something that gets left out, and it reinforces over and over again that formative research results should inform the program choices. It's not just we tick a box and say, okay, we did our formative research, let's go ahead and do what we always do. So I liked that a lot. And as I said before, it links to other useful resources where people can get more in-depth information. So some of the other comments around it is they say that they don't, the authors say they don't require or expect prior formative research experience from guide users, but I think that if a program is really going to apply this guide and get the most out of this guide, you know, the project probably needs a sort of champion who does have some formative research experience to really help program staff really apply it and use it well. I think overall, yeah, you can probably tell I'm a fan of the guide, and I think let's have a little discussion if people have questions, and encourage you to take a look at it on your own, and then we can, you know, later on people can vote on whether they want to recommend it or not. And just to mention that we have an item in our work plan for this year as the task force around providing some guidance just for planning for formative research in terms of those sort of budgeting categories and time and resources. And we want to do a few case studies. And so we're going to be working on that with Tom Davis. And I think that this guide has already given us a really helpful sort of outline for organizing that information. So it's been really helpful. When we get to the work plan discussion, we are open to any volunteers who might be interested in helping us with that work plan item. I think it'll be very useful for our members. And then the last slide I have. So yeah, so essentially the way this works after this, you guys can ask me any questions that you have or make any comments. After the meeting, please go ahead and take a look at it, just a quick skim through it. And then in the next few days, we'll send out a SurveyMonkey link where you can vote to recommend or not recommend. And so the task force decides. And yeah, if you guys know of other tools that you think it would be helpful for the task force to review, and even if you yourself might be interested in reviewing one,
and I don't see any questions or comments coming in. The last call for questions and comments. Anyone? Thanks so much. I think despite the slightly spotty internet, So we'll just move ahead and turn the microphone over to Gillian McKay, who will be presenting, and she's in the UK, but I think she's got pretty solid internet there. So we'll hope for the best. Welcome, Gillian.
Great. Thanks so much, Mary. I'm coming through okay, I hope. I'll just keep going. And
yeah, it sounds perfect.
That is true.
Sounds perfect.
Perfect. Brilliant. Great. Well, it's a good thing I'm at home today because I think our internet at the office is not working, so that worked out well. Great. So my name's Gillian. I'm a health advisor with Goal, and I'll be giving I don't know, a little bit of an overview of how we use participatory learning and action in our programming. And I mean, this is a very kind of quick overview, but I really hope that there's so much experience and expertise in the room, virtual room, that we can have a bit of a discussion afterwards about how you use it, and maybe people can walk away with a few extra tools that they can put in their own toolbox and send out into the field. Great. So I guess I have to change the slide, don't I? Ah, there we are. Cool. All right. So just briefly, what I'm going to talk about over probably maybe the next 15 to 20 minutes is what is PLA, although I'm aware I'm kind of talking about this with people who probably know. An example of a piece of research that came out fairly recently, kind of that we can use to champion how useful PLA is. 2 easy-to-use tools that I really love to use, not just in low-income settings, but across the board. And then 2 examples of how I've integrated PLA into existing trainings or programs, one of which is the DBC training manual that we're all familiar with. Great, next slide. Great, so I think always good to start off with a bit of a definition. So I pulled this out of Tools Together Now, which we can talk about a bit later as a resource potentially, which is what is participatory learning in action. So PLA is a growing family of approaches, tools, attitudes, and behaviors to enable and empower people to present, share, analyze, and enhance their knowledge of life and conditions, and to plan, act, monitor, evaluate, reflect, and scale out community action. Now, that's a horrifically run-on sentence, but I think it really brings, what I really love about this sentence is when I'm working with my team at field level, is what I get them to think about is, what does this tell you? And I think what it really comes out every time I've used this quote is that this really takes us out of the driver's seat. It makes it so that while we may be a facilitator of the action as the NGO, it really pushes and empowers the community to take on that action plan, to plan what they want to do and to take on the process themselves, making it a much more sustainable and long-term approach as opposed to often the kind of top-down approaches that we're often using. So the team and country will often say to me, well, Gillian, that's all very well and good, but you know, it takes a lot of time to do these kind of activities. And what I'll usually go to them and say is like, well, that can be true. But then I show them a chart like this. Now, this is specific, I think, to HIV. However, it doesn't have to be. So this is really looking at what is the level of community control of the action or of the process, and what is the level of sustainability. And then in the middle, you're looking at sort of the different types of participation that can be brought into bear. So at the very bottom, where we're kind of talking about information giving, whether that's, you know, somebody standing in front of a classroom full of children, whether that's a radio program that has no back and forth, or whether that's maybe kind of, you know, a leaflet going out, it is just information. And because the level of community control is very low, therefore I believe that, you know, on a ladder scale, the level of sustainability is quite low. And I think the nice thing is when we can start moving up this ladder to the stage of kind of joint decision-making and self-mobilization, we've got a much stronger activity, a much stronger program, and one that we're going to be able to take to exit on, knowing that it's going to be sustainable in the community itself. Great. So a piece of recent research that came out fairly recently in 2013 is by Prost et al. And it's a systematic review and meta-analysis of 9 different studies using participatory learning and action cycles in groups. So the various countries that were brought in were Bangladesh, Malawi, India, and Nepal. And their 3 outcomes of interest were maternal mortality, neonatal mortality, and stillbirth. And so what they found was, when they looked at all across those 9 studies, they didn't see a statistically significant difference in using participatory learning and action groups versus not. However, a subgroup analysis, so when they looked at the 4 studies where there was at least 30% of pregnant women who were participating in these groups, they saw quite a significant reduction of 49% in maternal mortality and 33% in neonatal mortality. So, and I think what that tells us as a community of practice is that, when we're really thinking about what kind of, what's that tipping point, at which point we're actually going to see effect, is when we need to be hitting at least 30% of our target group in order to show that, A, it's working, and B, that it's going to be cost effective. So, but it's quite a nice little article if you want to read it, and I'm happy, well, there's the reference, but I'm happy to share it. It's an open access resource. Great, so I'm going to give you 2 particular tools that I really, really love. Now, I know that we're all behavior change practitioners in the room, and I'm sure most of you are very familiar with transect walks and mapping and kind of maybe daily activity calendars for gender. But these are 2 that I think are maybe a bit fun and integrate really beautifully with some of the work that we already do. So this one's social network mapping that you can see here. And I have used this loads when I'm doing the Design for Behavior Change training plan, because often when we're doing the DBC approach, we ask, the questions, who is influential in your life for this particular behavior? And we get an answer of maybe my mother-in-law or whoever it might be, but we don't really know a lot more about the other people in their lives, because we don't often end up just looking at a couple of people. So I think this kind of bulks that section up a lot more around social norms and social networks. So it allows you to work with the priority group to identify who are these key people in the life who you can depend on for various types of support, whether that's financial or emotional or practical, maybe for childcare and stuff like that. Also allows us as practitioners to identify who should we be targeting if we want to be impacting on a particular priority group. So I really like this tool. I think it's really valuable. Now, something I want to put out to the group, and maybe for the discussion component, is while I was putting these slides together, I was thinking, where could I really see this used, but I haven't tried it yet? And one of the areas where I'd love to see this attempted is in displacement. So in internally displaced persons camps or refugee settings, where maybe people have lost their initial social network, and there can be, as we all know, quite a bit of concern and despair when people feel like they've and have lost their social network. So this could be potentially a route for people to see, yes, I do still have a social network. I do still have people I can depend on for support, although it's changed dramatically versus my home community. So I don't know, maybe that's something we can talk about if that might be feasible or not. Great, so that's kind of one of a really good tool that I really like. And the second one I absolutely love is this one, which I call the yes, no, maybe game, but others might call something very different, maybe agree, disagree, or not sure. So this one comes in really handy. I've used this in high-income countries, low-income countries, middle-income countries, when I'm trying to kind of bring up a topic that people might be a little bit shy about talking about. So something like negotiating condom use, or family planning for kind of younger youth, or even potentially something like gender norms in settings where maybe there's quite an unequal gender mix. So this is the opportunity where people can read out a particular sentence, something like, I am able to negotiate condom use with my partner. And then they can either go in the agree section, disagree section, and they kind of vote with their feet, so they actually physically get up and move. Or they can go in the kind of I'm not sure section. And then the agrees and disagrees kind of have a bit of a debate trying to convince the not sures to join their camp. And it really allows, I think, in quite a non-threatening environment, people to analyze and dissect some of these attitudes and beliefs and the reasons behind them. And it's a tool that people can then, often I'm doing this with kind of community workers or community facilitators, can then take back to the community when they're trying to try this out and raise a topic that can be a little bit sensitive at times. So I really like this, and it's a really fun one. Great. So as I'm kind of ticking away here, I want to give you kind of 2 examples of when I've used these. So often I think, particularly our teams in country can imagine that, we've got a module, we've got a plan, we can't really adapt it based because we've got, this set of activities that we have to use. And so 2 examples of where I think we can challenge that, and we should be challenging that, bringing in PLA, And the first one I'm going to use is the Designing for Behavior Change training program. Now, I appreciate that this is, very much a TOPS resource and an FSN-supported approach, and I love it. I've done this training, goodness, in probably 10 countries now, and really, really love it, and it always goes over super well. But something that I've found, and maybe there's other people in the room who would agree, is by the kind of 5th or 6th day when we're on to activities, people are starting to get pretty tired. The creativity is not necessarily where we'd like it to be, so we end up kind of seeing the same activities come up in the end, despite having done this really beautiful kind of fake barrier analysis or mock barrier analysis. And as a facilitator, I also find myself getting pretty tired. So what I've started to do is on about day 2 of the training, I hand out a guide, like a PLA tools manual, and I get the teams to kind of look at it over the course of the week. And then the day before we do the activity section, I ask them to look and pick 1 or 2 tools or 1 or 2 PLA activities. They're then going to present back the next day. So if it's something like if they've been working on a behavior such as a farming behavior, then I would ask them to pick a tool that would be relevant to a farming type activity that would address 1 or more of their bridges to activities that came up from their mock barrier analysis. And then the next day, they become the facilitators of that activity, and the rest of the room are the participants or the community members. And by the end of that day, people walk away with having, tried at least to facilitate 1 or 2, gives me an opportunity to, gives me and the rest of the group an opportunity to kind of give feedback and critique on their facilitation skills, but then also allows people to walk away knowing at least, 5 or 10 new PLA activities that they've seen in practice and problem solved kind of some nitpicky angles of it. And I find that works really, really well. Plus it also gives, honestly, selfishly, a little bit of a break to the facilitator on sometimes, when it's been quite a long week. So, for those of you who are interested in that, I'm happy to share. And the other one I'm going to talk about is this community-led Ebola action field guide. So during the Ebola response in Sierra Leone, GOAL plus a number of other NGOs, we formed a consortium called SMAC, Social Mobilization Action Consortium. We were out there, kind of pounding the pavement with our social mobilizers, working with communities to try to get them to create community action plans of how they would prevent transmission of Ebola in their village. Now this was in a time before the ETCs, the Ebola treatment centers, had come online. So people were often, sick or dead people were still left in these villages, and that could be a couple of days. So transmission was very problematic. So we were trying to get people to create, or trying to get communities to develop these action plans, but we were finding that there wasn't as much participation as we would have liked to see. So we started bringing in some PLA activities, using some of the ones that everybody's quite familiar with, transect walks, mapping of communities, stuff like that. But then we also brought in the body mapping one, the body mapping tool, which worked out really, really nicely. So that's where you kind of draw a body on the floor on a piece of flip chart, and we can identify what are the symptoms of Ebola and what are some early symptoms and some late symptoms. And that really allowed the community to identify what they should be looking out for in their own particular community, whether it was their own family members or community members or strangers who were coming into the village. And we ended up having quite an uptick in action plans that I think made a difference. As you can imagine, there was so many people doing so much during that response. It's a bit hard to know exactly, but we feel it worked quite well. Great, so that's pretty much it from my side. I mean, these are 2 resources that I really like to use. So this is the Tools Together Now, and I'm happy to share that. So I see a question from Mary, but I'll get to that just in a second. So the Tools Together Now is a PLA activity book that I use on a regular basis. It comes from HIV, but it really has over 100, I think exactly 100 tools that are all a bit different from the stages of planning through implementation all the way to evaluation. And then also the IEED website, which has just absolutely amazing levels of things, so many different tools and resources. And I'll answer Mary's question here in just half a second, but I'm going to kind of end with a little bit of a call to action, I think, for the community. So I'm working on my PhD at the moment, and I was just at a meeting with a huge number of fellow PhD students, all of whom are out in the field doing research. And I find a lot of researchers, like not necessarily people who haven't necessarily been practitioners, development practitioners in the past, don't know how to use participatory methods when they're doing data collection. There's in university often all you're taught about is, to be honest, kind of key informant interviews and focus groups. You're not given other options that really kind of engage the community. So if you're working with researchers or meal staff, M&E staff in your organization, please do kind of give them some ideas about how participatory approaches can be used for evaluation and monitoring and research, because I think it just adds a lot more. So that's pretty much it from me. Mary had a question here, learning more, receiving the materials used to boost creativity and use of PLA during GBC training. And yeah, so I'm very happy to share that 100 PLA tools. It's not as yet a recommended resource from FSM, so let's be cautious there. But I'm happy to share it within the group so we can discuss this. Maybe we want to share it. I mean, I think during the GBC training, I try to bring in PLA approaches wherever I can, even if it's just, kind of briefly to get people up and walking around and a bit more engaged. So I mean, that one, the yes, agree, disagree, not sure one, we've even used that, to be honest, when we're trying to pick what kind of behaviors we're going to focus on during the training itself, just to kind of get people up and walking and engaged a bit more. So, and I think this is an opportunity potentially where we could brainstorm where are stages in that GBC manual where we could bring in even more tools. Because I mean, it's a very participatory training as is, but I think we can test and trial new things. Great. So that's kind of it from me, I think. Kim Norris had a question. How do these social network tools translate into mixed methods data analysis? Is there a nifty way to combine these results in some labeling quant way with other quantitative data to analyze the two together? Fascinating question, and I'm going to actually pass it over to the group because I think I would have to give a little bit more thought to that before I'd be able to answer super concretely. Yeah, so let me pass over, see if there's any questions. I think this is an opportunity for discussion more than anything.
That's while Adrian explains to you all how to activate your mics. Okay? And you can contemplate this question.
Thanks, Mary. So I activated the mics again for all of the participants, and all you need to do to turn them on is click on the mic icon you can see up top. Once it's green, you can go ahead and use it, and after you do, just click on it again to mute it.
So does anyone have thoughts on that question that Kim posed to the group? Don't be shy. I think Kim has added more information. She said, I'm picturing something like providing criteria values to each of the components or elements of the social network line, and then aligning these by person interviews to their other qualitative data. I was hoping someone had tried it. Kim, do you mind picking up the microphone and just going ahead and telling us a little bit more about what you're thinking, if you're able to open your mic? On a mic icon at the top of the page, which is probably gray, and then when you click on it, it turns green, and then you can do the little drop-down arrow to unmute it.
Kim's not able to pick up her mic, and that's too bad. But I really love your idea there, Kim, about this criteria values. I almost wonder, I mean, I think we could try this amongst ourselves. Like you could sit down just with people in your office and give it a go and see if something like that is potentially possible. I mean, there's really no reason it has to be with kind of a particular community group just now if we're just trying to pilot it and see if we could assign some kind of quantitative value.
analysis, in a way, we've sort of quantified qualitative data, and you can't really quantify qualitative data, I think, but the idea is to help set priorities, like which elements are more important than the other. You know, how do you narrow down the determinants and pick which ones to focus on? Let me try to get back to Kim's question again. Mixed methods data analysis. Yeah, that's a deep question, Kim. Any other comments or questions from people? Sorry that we are having a little bit of difficulty with some people's mic. Sounds like somebody's picked up a mic. Good.
I mean, personally, I'd love to know if there's particular PLA tools that anybody has found to be really effective, maybe across a number of different areas. I mean, I love giving people tools that don't necessarily have to be used in a particular area. Often my DBC trainings, and I'm sure the same for everyone, they can be livelihoods, wash, health, food security, nutrition. Like, it can be across the board. So if anybody has any particular tools that they really like using, I'd love to hear about them, because I always love adding more to my kind of metaphorical toolbox.
We do have a couple of people typing. Everyone, if you're having problems turning your mics on, please go ahead and share your thoughts on the chat box.
This group, the SBC task force, anyway, I typed in my email address. And Jillian, do you mind sharing your email address if people want to contact you for more information? Type that into the chat box. So thank you so much. I know this is kind of a short time to cover a big topic, and I have like a lot of favorite tools I use. I haven't called it PLA tools so much. I've tended to call them participatory adult education, activities or tools. But I've got a ton that I love, but nothing jumps to mind when you're trying to think of them in this kind of setting. Well, if there's no more comments or questions right now, thank you so much, Jillian, and we'll have to continue this conversation ongoingly, I think. I'm going to move ahead and share a little bit. If Ashley had not jumped offline, she was going to share a little bit more about one of the projects on our work plan about formative research. It's been on our work plan for about 3 years. People have been very interested in developing some kind of guidance and encouragement to people to do more with their formative research, to figure out something. People want to know if they haven't got it in their work plan, how much will it cost, how long will it take, those kind of things. And there is a little group right now that consists of Ashley, Claire Boswell, and Tom Davis who are working on this. And if others want to form the mini working group, to join the little working group, we would love to hear from you. So please let us know. Claire, do you want to add anything about the work that's going on with that formative research project?
Sure. Sorry.
Just tell people how fun it's going to be. Okay.
I was clicking on the wrong icon to unmute my mic. Yeah, I think, so we have an outline. In fact, Tom has already completed a rough draft, but I think the biggest thing that we need right now are some examples that we can use, sort of mini case studies, particularly if people have cost information. I think a lot of times when we do these, it's wrapped into our larger project budget, and so we may have a timeline of the formative research task that was done, but maybe not specific cost information. So if you have a really great example of any type of formative research that you've done in a project, we'd love to hear about it, especially if you have cost data. That would be really helpful, because we want to give people a little bit more of a handle on how to plan for it, not just how to do it methodologically. So feel free to contact me. I'll type my email address in the box here if you have some thoughts.
One of our items on our work plan. Another one, we had worked on the Ebola care group modules in partnership with the core SBC working group, and finished up that piece. There was another Ebola-related piece that's still in the works, and I got Tom heads up that little working group, and I got a quick report from him on that. That is in progress. We're getting near to finishing the barrier analysis compendium, but then now it turns out that I think he said, hold on a second, he said that Cure Americas is going to have a little bit of funding for doing some more a little additional research in Liberia. That might they might want to expand the scope of that document, and he'll know more in a few weeks. But anyway, that is moving along. We haven't forgotten about that project, and I'm really looking forward to see the barrier analysis questionnaires and some of the results that they found as they were working on the Ebola-related figures. And then the last point, I hope some of you are familiar with and have been attending Journal Club webinars. We have had some really great ones, and we have one coming up soon, which will be my next slide, I think. But anyway, think about volunteering to present. This is a collaboration of the SBC working group, the core group, SBC working group, and our group, the SBC task force. So this is a great way to stay up to date on current literature, and it's kind of fun too. So the next journal club that's coming up is on the article, Improving Public Engagement with Climate Change. And it's a short, really engaging read if you had time to read it in advance of the journal club meeting, but it's not required. It's fine to just attend, without having had the opportunity to read the article. And there's also a really exciting webinar coming up about the African farmer game. Is anybody on the call who could say a little bit more about that webinar? Anyway, I hear that it's going to be really, really super. So stay tuned, and hopefully you're also on the core mailing list, but we'll try to, we'll forward this out to you all as well. Okay, yeah, it looks like Adrian has put both, has put the Journal Club link up on our chat box. So we can just close out, everyone. Thank you so much for your attendance and your participation in the working task force. Not to call it working group. Okay, in the SBC task force. And thank you so much to our presenter, Jillian, and to you all. So have a great afternoon, or wherever you are, what time of day it is. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.